Hi everyone. If you're new to layout in Maya, maybe you're the layout lead for the first time, or maybe you're just interested in learning some new camera techniques and basics of using the camera in Maya, then you're at the right place. I'm going to make these videos as short and sweet and to the point as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. To put a camera in Maya, there's a few ways to do it. The easiest way is going up to the Create tab in the top left, clicking that, and then it'll give you a bunch of options. You go to Cameras, and I usually always do this top one, camera right there. So now you'll have this camera, it'll come into your scene, and you can move it just like you can any ordinary object. You can also rotate it. One thing that you shouldn't do is scale your cameras, because when you scale it, that also affects a lot of these attributes within the camera, such as aperture and depth of field, which will be a problem later on. So don't scale your cameras. If you do want to scale it, if you go over here in your channel box at the very bottom where it says locator scale, you can scale it doing that. And I just did that by clicking it and middle mouse button dragging. That's the same thing as going, whoops, the same thing as going over here and like typing in 5 or whatever. Cool. So let's get some objects into our scene. I already put some shapes in here. So we can see that, let's say I want to make this my focal point of my composition. So the first thing we need to do is see what this camera is looking at. The best way that I found to do that is going to panels. And then you're going to want to go down to layouts and do side by side. And this is going to change your screen. So that way you have two different screens going on. Like if I go over here to this camera and I move it, you'll see it'll also move in this one. So this is, we're looking at side X right here. So we're going to want to change this panel to be what this camera is looking at. There's a few ways to do this also. The fastest way to do this is by right clicking this and pressing camera 1, because that's what this is labeled as. Whenever you put a camera in, it just says camera, and then how many cameras you have in the scene, it just puts a number after that. So cool. Now this panel over here is what this camera is seeing. So we can rotate it by holding down J. It snaps our rotation. So I can turn it a perfect 90 degrees, and then I can back this up. All right. Now we have our shapes and our composition. But there's a few more things that we need to make sure this camera has on before we do anything else. Up here in the top, we have a bunch of different buttons. These right here are all your camera buttons from the left over here. So a lot of these are just used for cameras, not all of them, but these are usually the shortcuts that I use. So for this one, this is called the film gate, or I'm sorry, the resolution gate. This one's the film gate. And what this allows is if we click and drag this out, this actually shows the borders of what our camera sees. So if I were to move this camera like this, all of a sudden that cube is no longer in our camera screen space. So it's going to be a little annoying if we have it like half and half like this, because then we can't see what's going out of our composition on the left, out of our shot. Easy way to fix this is by selecting your camera on the right side, pressing Attribute Editor. And then if we go down here, we get a bunch of crazy numbers. And again, I rarely touch any of these numbers. These are all just very optional things if you want to. In later videos, we'll get into what some of these do, and I only touch a few of them. But down here at the bottom, underneath this labeled film back, you'll open that up, and then there'll be something called fit resolution gate, and you're just going to set that to horizontal. Now, no matter what size you make this, it will always fit in there. So that's really handy. Another thing that I personally do is I go down to display options, and a lot of times in layout, you'll have things off screen that are distracting to what you actually want to be looking at. So let's say this cone up here. If I were to play blast this out, you would still see this cone up here. And that can be distracting sometimes when you're trying to have the viewer look at something in the middle that you want them to see. So like I said, we can click and drag or just click that camera. And under display options, in order to fix this, we can just make this black like that, and then change the gate mask opacity to 1. So now we're absolutely locked in looking at what we want to look at. This is just a personal preference of mine, but I've just noticed that it makes my play blasts come out a lot cleaner, and it just helps the audience focus in on what I want to show them in my layout. Cool. So that's about the basics of a camera, just putting a camera in and getting the UI elements in there. And we'll go over more techniques and stuff in the next video.